We want to thank you for coming. And we are here to go through the facility committee's proposal and informational packet. So Pastor Eric, would you open us with prayer, please?
I will. Let's pray. Gracious Lord God, on this night we gather here to once again engage in further thought and planning and decision making for the proposed facility project here at St. John's. Lord, we thank you for all the people that have been involved. We thank you for the effort and the faithfulness of the congregation. And Lord, as Jeff shares, we just pray that there would be clarity for those that are here tonight. And Lord, may we just continue to seek your will. In Christ we pray. Amen.
Okay. Jeff, you're up.
Good evening. Go ahead and get started here and jump right in. Give you a little bit of background. So in 2014, congregation approved a capital campaign to fund improvements to the facility, and that original goal was to raise $4.5 million to renovate the existing facility and construct additional space at the south end of the structure. So inside of your packet, you will see those original goals. In October of 2018, Consistory took a recommendation from the Capital Campaign Committee to act on facility improvements. It was said at that time it would take an unknown number of years to realize the $4.5 million goal, and some projects could be addressed now. You might remember maybe way back the original ministry's assessment and planning committee had identified things such as outside storage, enhancements to the playground, and a lot of those things, and those have been done. So this is just kind of a continuation of that. In early 2019, the facility committee was formed and did their work and research. And in the January 2020 annual meeting, the congregation approved to enter into a concept with G5 Architecture of Archbold to obtain concepts and cost estimates to improve three things. And those three things are restrooms, worship experience, and the overall physical accessibility of the church. So I do want to take a moment, and pretty soon we're going to dive in here, and this following presentation will pretty much go through your packet, a little different than it's printed, but starting on page 4. So that's where we'll go. But I want to take a minute to let you know that this is a recommendation of a heavily scrutinized solution that the facility committee went through to do three things: improve the restrooms, the worship experience, and physical accessibility of the church. You're going to see concepts, you're going to see drawings, and you're going to see a budget. Okay? This is simply, it's not a building plan. Okay? It's not blueprints. It's not exactly how it's going to be. We're not going to be able to tell you if the carpet in here will be burgundy or blue or whatever. It's not quite to that detail. The goal of this was to come up with a solution for restrooms, worship, and accessibility, and get a good, reliable cost estimate. Okay, so we're starting now. If you look at your packet on page 4, it will somewhat go along with this presentation on the screen. So you'll see in the top left of each slide, it'll just say solution or consideration, and you'll follow that as we go through. So for instance, we're talking about the solution to the restroom here on the south side of the church at the end of the hallway. We currently have 2 restrooms, one women's and one men's. That will be transformed into single stall family style restrooms. Then on the first floor, you will see in those 2 blue highlighted areas that we're going to convert 2 classrooms into 2 multi-stall restrooms with a men's and a women's. So we're going to move those a little farther north in the hallway, closer to the sanctuary, yet still keep them close to the fellowship hall, where some activities are held that those are needed. So you'll see a men's restroom, a women's restroom, and then on the east side of the hallway, or it would be the bottom of that diagram, that room where the women women's is shown, and the custodian is a very large room. So that would be split up, and we would have additional custodian storage there at the one end. That's correct. Yep.
So the other classroom that's listed there, does that exist now?
Yes is offices. Is that correct?
No, the women's restroom and the custodian, that's actually a separate classroom that has a divider in it.
Okay, so then this will have to have a wall.
Or, yes,
But I mean, that's some sort of, but there's not a wall in there right now.
just a folding curtain.
Gotcha.
Yep.
We're going to create a new second floor restroom. As we go through this, you'll kind of see we think there's going to be a lot more use of the second floor because we're borrowing some spaces on the first floor that are classrooms for things like restrooms. So we're going to convert one classroom, which would be the tower where the computers used to be, into one family restroom and add custodian storage. So you'll see how that has been divided up there with a restroom in a quarter of it, and custodian storage in the other quarter, and then you've got a corridor. We're going to talk more about an elevator in a little bit, and that'll also come into play there. So consideration, what are we going to solve here? We're going to gain 3 family restrooms. We're going to end up with 9 stalls versus the current 5 stalls. We're going to have updated and more comfortable spaces in the restrooms, closer to the sanctuary, while still in proximity of Fellowship Hall. We're going to gain additional custodian storage, but we are going to lose 2 classrooms, the tower upstairs, the room downstairs, and then what we call the preschool room now. So at the end of each section, in this case restrooms, I'll ask questions on restrooms. With a smaller group, we can shout them out like we're doing, Joyce, but I'll pause briefly here and ask if there's any questions specifically on the restrooms.
Okay, I did not read out my old notes because I didn't have time, but how, when we did this plan like way back, when we started talking about the 4.5 million, we talked about moving restrooms. Was that to the same space or was that in a different space? Does anyone remember?
No.
And I just remember one of the goals from that time frame was to open up the gauntlet hallway to make it more friendly.
Yep.
So by putting these restrooms in there, are we still gonna be able to accomplish that at some point down the road?
That was way back, Joyce, how many years ago, but
I know I've got it in
yeah.
a box somewhere.
I
You guys are the experts, so I figured you all would know that off the top of your head.
So what Joyce is referring to is at one time, possibly the committee right before capital campaign.
It was part of the 2014 proposal.
Okay. We had talked briefly about opening up the hallway from roughly, right around the offices south to around these restrooms. We're proposing to widen everything up and create more of an open, welcoming space and not so much of a corridor. Again, jump in if I'm wrong, but I think as we progress through time, it ended up landing with the south entrance and making that more of a gathering area with not so much concern of this long hallway. That's my recollection. Does that seem correct? So it would be a lot more in fact, probably impossible to do this because we would be touching areas we just touched. And that's kind of one thing we looked at the facility committee now. We don't want to do anything that's going to have to get ripped out should the project continue on, and when it continues on. Other questions on restrooms? Yep.
There were multiple proposals, but nothing was really finalized. Correct. What that concept would be. Correct. The concept of building in the parking lot was not on the
that might have been revision 1F.
I
So,
think it was because the congregation did not want to move from this sanctuary.
Well, that was back in 2003. That preceded the 2014. Yeah, that was a pretty clear vote.
other restroom questions? Okay, worship. Chancel renovation. So in past congregational action, we approved the removal of the organ. So the organ console over there and the organ. So that would be a part of this plan, is to remove this. And then you would see us level and extend the floor. So this floor is at different heights. You've got one floor there with the piano, you've got another floor level back there where the organ is, you've got a level here. You actually have 3 levels right here in the old choir loft, so there's 3 levels right there. So we would make this all one level, about this height. Then we would extend the floor, so the floor would come out to about right here, right about there. Now once we bring the floor all at one height, now the door will be this high. So what they'll do is they will raise the door up to give us a full height door. And to get into this room, instead of stepping down like this to get into the room, you'll actually open the door and then step into the room. So this will be all one height, all usable and versatile. And then the pulpit and the lectern will become mobile to give us some versatility. So you can take this lectern right here, and you might see it trimmed off and then made mobile. Now, it may certainly still sit there. It just depends what's going on during that worship service. Same thing over here on this pulpit. Okay? It might be trimmed off and have wheels or some other way to move it around as needed. We're also going to add in a ramp. So you can see that right here. And there we go. Once the organ is removed, it's technically the first bullet point. Once the organ is removed, then we'll be able to add a ramp that extends down that corridor right there. So it will go down there and it will give easy access up to this level here in the chancel. So that's what the blue highlight's showing you there, is the ramp. Roughly ends a little after that column right there. You'll also see new flooring throughout the sanctuary. So I mentioned earlier, is the carpet going to be burgundy or what shade of red or blue or whatever it is? You'll see that happen, new carpeting. Pew refinishing or replacement. We're not saying we're going to replace them. We're not saying we're going to refinish them. But we are saying that if you look very closely, something needs done. Okay? They're just starting to show a little bit of wear. So we've built a budget in there for refinishing or replacement, whatever they may be. You'll see next steps inside of this packet, and we'll talk about it a little later, but if this passes, there's a committee following our committee, the facility committee, that's the building committee, and they will be working and getting, I'm sure, congregational feedback and going through to nail down some of these details, like pews. We'll do a video and audio system update. For instance, this screen that we're looking at right here will be gone. So that screen will be gone. Instead, updated and replaced with smaller monitors throughout the sanctuary, probably tucked back in the corners along the columns. So we'll gain that space open again right there. Also some audio updates as well to our audio system. Brighter and additional lighting. And that not only included making these fixtures like this or these brighter, but also some additional lights to highlight things that are going here on stage, whatever, in the chancel, whatever that may be at that time. So a little better lighting up here. Electrical update. The electrical in here needs updated in terms of wiring and so forth. Someone was sharing with me Sunday after our meeting on this that they've done some electrical work in here, and it is 3-wire, like we're familiar with, but it's wrapped in cloth. It's the old cloth insulation, and that cloth is disintegrating, so whenever you work in there, that cloth insulator's going away. So, did you know also that in order to have proper projection and audio, that there's an extension cord that runs clear from the boiler room, underneath in the tunnel, underneath the sanctuary, up out here and over to the projector to get a proper ground. So there's just some updating that needs done here. Additional accessible seating and more space between pews. So there's 2 important things built in there. One is the pews are about 12 inches apart from front to back. So we can increase that, and that will give a little bit more space between the pews to get in and out and so forth. The other thing that is possible is to remove certain sections of the pews. Right now, if you need an accessible space, if you're in a wheelchair, you have a walker, those types of things, you've got one place to sit, clear back in the back, okay? Well, we might be able, and we can, remove certain section or sections throughout, so there's additional places to sit should you have accessibility issues. So your considerations, you're going to get a larger and increased and more functional chancel area. There's going to be accessibility to the chancel up the ramp. Additional comfort with increased pew spacings, so a little more comfort out in the pews. Ability for those with physical limitations to have access to other seating areas. Some necessary updates to video, audio, lighting, and electrical. But we are going to lose some pew seating. So if we remove sections of pews or we space them out, you're going to lose some seating. Again, something for the building committee, if this passes, the building committee to follow, to work on. But our goal is somewhat to retain seating for at least 300 people in one service comfortably. And I think the number is about 385 right now, the way that it sets. Questions on worship? There's a lot of changes there. Probably about to where you're at. So those 3 pew. Yep. It will follow their guidelines. The architect would design it. It may go out 4 pews or something like that, but yeah. Did it? So what you're saying is I'm going to lose my pew spot? Is that what you're saying? So, yeah.
And then if that flooring is brought out to the front, then the steps come off of that yet.
Yeah, there'll still be steps up here.
So then we will probably lose the row in the front.
And one of the ideas that we have was some of the seats, some of the pews that might leave, okay, could be some of these up here in front to give some more of that accessible seating. So, yeah. Other questions? Right. We did not come up with, not that it couldn't be an idea for the next group, but there was no discussion on doing anything in the back, making the narthex a part of the sanctuary. I suppose, yep. Yep. For like overflow seating and that kind of thing. Yeah. Yeah. Other questions? Okay. Accessibility, and we're going to talk first about a big part of accessibility, which is the elevator. It will be added to the exterior of the education wing, the hallway with the classrooms, on the east side, the inside of this U-shaped area in the parking lot here. It will be accessible from the ground floor outside or the inside of both floors. So on the ground floor, you could actually pull your vehicle up outside, unload, and walk into a little foyer where then, with a door and everything, which then you could get into the elevator if you needed to get things upstairs into the second floor. And then it would only be accessible from the inside on the second floor. It would just simply travel from ground floor to second floor. You see it right there added just on the east side. So the blue area is an addition, and then you'll see it added there on the east of that existing structure. In the lower right-hand corner, right here, that's your second floor. That's the tower where I showed you a restroom, custodian, and the corridor. So it's right there on the outside of the building. And if you look at that sometime, you'll see that the tower actually has a dormer-style window there. So it would kind of slot right into there, and the next slide will show you how that kind of blends in. So when you go out there and you look, you will see it doesn't look exactly like that, but there is a dormer window right there in the roof, and that is the tower, and that's where we propose that the elevator would be. And you would have an entrance into one side of this with a sidewalk and so forth. If we go clear down to the south entrance, right now that is not accessible because of the steps. There would be a gradually elevated sidewalk between the kitchen and the south entrance. So, not that it would go exactly there, but that's the concept, is there would be an elevated sidewalk, ramp, concrete ramp, whatever you might, to get up there and come in the south entrance. Excuse me, this is one area that could change, but luckily this only is maybe $3,000 to $4,000 in that to put in this, because when and if and should the project continue on the south entrance, there was going to be a newer fellowship hall, a new south entrance. So this is one where we're a little temporary solution like this, and that could be permanent and last a while if we don't proceed, but at least we're not spending a lot of money to rip it out later. Door openers for 4 entrances. So 2 for the east side of the education wing, south entrance, and then the carport. Video security and intercoms at entrances. And some of us have already this type of video security built in our doorknobs or doorbells, those types of things. I'm sure it'll be commercial grade instead of residential, but it doesn't have to be anything extremely elaborate. We also have accessibility built into other areas, as you've already seen, like the restroom, like the sanctuary, such as the ramp, pew spacing and removal, and then the south entrance. So what kind of questions do we have on accessibility? We can go back here to the elevator. Anything? Okay. Joyce? Any of the other aspects related to accessibility? Ramp on the south side, anything there? All right. HVAC, heat and air. So in one of our first cost estimates back, we were shocked to see how much it was going to cost to put in some necessary updates for heating and cooling, like cooling the second floor Sunday school classrooms. So it also will damage, certain renovations will damage the existing in-floor heat, so we have to do something there. Okay. The way that the church building is built and its construction methods make it very difficult or reduce the number of ways that we can heat and cool the building, okay, with the concrete floors and different construction. So we have limited options. So with that first estimate being so expensive, and only being part of the building, not all of it, okay, we went back and said, let's get an estimate to completely heat and cool the fellowship hall, the first and second floor education wings, the chapel entrance, the narthex, and the hallways. So for instance, the first draft would be in better heating and cooling in the sanctuary, but not the narthex. So when we saw the amount of money this was going to cost, like, well, let's give a full solution instead of a part solution. So the original boiler is still in place here, and we would replace that boiler with a new boiler or boilers. We will still have hot water heat, but that water, instead of traveling through the floors and being radiant heat, it will travel through the pipes into a exchanger, which will then blow out hot air, okay? So we'll add forced air heat and cooling in those areas. So in the sanctuary, we will not have heat in the floor. Instead, the heat will come out of these vents right here, similar to how our air conditioning does. So we're going to get an updated solution for all these areas. We're going to get air conditioning in areas that are air conditioned. We're going to get better cooling up in the sanctuary because there's a solution built in there to keep that a little bit cooler. We are going to lose the in-floor radiant heat, and that's a big one. It's a big one. We're already losing heat, radiant heat now in the floor, as different zones the pipes in there rust, break, whatever, we have to cut out that loop. So we're already losing some of it. It's not going to last forever. It just depends, this would kind of do it in right here. So about 40% of our budget is allocated or going to heating and cooling. That's a lot of money. Questions on heating and cooling?
But this takes care of the whole space, the whole building, or we still keeping existing cooling up?
It's not one system for everything. It's a system to do certain areas, but like even cooling of the education wing is a different system than the cooling here, right? So it's not one system that does it all. I think if I think back, Joyce, like the fireside room was one. I don't necessarily know it was updated.
They will all have to be replaced. We've lost one in the parish hall. The one in the office is on its last legs. So, yeah.
One of them up in the fellowship hall in the attic, I guess you'd say, is out, and that's what prompted the one that went in through the wall, if you've noticed that, so, yeah. Other heating and cooling questions?
So everything will be heated and cooled, what about the hallway?
Mm-hmm.
Everything will be.
Yep.
In the summer, the hallways never cool, they're all heated.
Correct. Okay, additional finishes. So after we got done and looked at this, and we're doing a lot of things inside the walls and that aren't apparent. So we were going to take the opportunity to freshen some other areas of the church building. You can see some of the details on page 9C, towards the bottom 2/3. So carpet paint, walls, new ceiling finishes. If you start to pay attention and look at ceiling tile and stains, water stains are in the ceiling tile, it's just time to freshen some things up. So you'll see that there. Replacement of concrete in these areas at the south entrance. If you notice under the portico, there's cracks. It's heaved up. That one door even sticks, in certain times. So time to tear that out and put some new concrete in. And then steps and landings, the entrance to the fireside room, the kitchen, and then the vestry right outside here. So, what questions on finishes and concrete work? I'm glad you brought that up, Joyce, and it was part of the first meeting as well. And if we go back to page number 2, 1A. So we can remember back to years ago where there was a building proposal that failed, and that, as Todd had talked about, and a big part of it was moving this sanctuary from here to a new spot, and then this would become the fellowship hall. And there's probably many reasons why that didn't pass, but that certainly was one of them. We heard that loud and clear. Our committee knows that, and if you look at section .1A, the enhancement of the existing sanctuary retaining the original character. So yes, there will be things that change. We just know that. For instance, if this is all one level, we probably won't have this right here, right? But as Pastor Eric pointed out on Sunday, we used to have this over there by the piano, way back. And then that had to be removed. There was no piano there, and that was removed when the piano was put in. So there will be changes. Things will evolve. But I think in general, I can't tell you if it'll be these light fixtures brighter or different light fixtures. I don't know that.
But I mean, like the dark,
I would assume, yep.
I would assume that they stay.
Yep, we want to retain. You got it. But with enhancements, so there's some changes, right? So, but yep. Other questions? Good. All right, so here's how move on to the estimate and how this is bundled. The basic package is $1.16 to $1.33 million for restrooms, worship accessibility, HVAC in all areas, your finishes, your elevator, and then for a grand total of $1.417 to $1.617 million. There are some COVID pricing increases in there, so when they did this, they put in some elevated costs. Now we don't know what's going to happen, and when we build, I don't know if prices will be up or down, but there's been some adjustment there. Questions on budget? Yeah, Rick Graber put that together. Okay, this is an estimate, not a quotation. And just, as we've talked about, the significant investment and improvements that aren't visible, but, with construction of this age, and yes, we've tried to keep up on it, eventually things need remodeled and renovated and updated, so some of it we can't see. All right, where can the money come from? So if you look on screen or on page 10, there are three funds where potentially this money can be pulled from. The building fund with a balance as of September 30th, $1.127 million. The legacy fund of $107,000. The Eugene Buer legacy fund of $832,000. And the total of those funds is $2.067 million. So the building fund is related to, it is the capital campaign, the Imagine Your Faith building campaign, and that's where the donations and then all the growth of the funds from investments are housed. So that is truly 100% applicable to what we're doing. In addition to that, we've got the Legacy Fund and the Eugene Buer Legacy Fund, and their designations are such they can be used for capital improvements like this. So there you see a total of the funds. I would assume that any kind of action in our congregational meeting will also include where the money would be pulled from. So what actions are we going to see on the congregational meeting to talk about this? You're going to see a vote to approve or not approve this project. So who knows what's going to happen that day, but if it goes this route and what comes through, you'll see a motion made and maybe seconded and discussion to approve it as is, and also to encumber the necessary funding for this project from the appropriate accounts. So if that's approved, okay, however that may look, then consistory will form a building committee, which people of the congregation may volunteer to be considered. And the capital campaign committee will then fire back up, meeting in earnest, because this isn't the whole project, it's just part of the project. So, and the hope would be to boost and continue to get more donations and commitment, not simply to spend all the money that we've raised and deplete the building fund. So hopefully it would build some excitement and people would see some results. We'll also interview different architectural firms to select the appropriate firm. And then we will work with, the building committee will work with and oversee the work of the architecture with the architect, and then all the phases of pre-construction and construction. And I know, but I'm certain they will collect all kinds of feedback from the congregation, however that may be, because we're all invested in this building, right? And there are things that we love about it, and so I know that they'll collect our feedback and consider that too. I'm certain they will. So. All right, so that brings us towards the end. Any final question and answer? Final questions anybody has? I can tell you that I've got 2 right now that I have to get some answers before our congregational meeting, which is, what's the potential for asbestos in this project, such as the tile underneath the pews? And I'm not saying it's got asbestos in it, but I would assume that the architect has considered that. And the other was sprinklers. So there's nothing being proposed that would be sprinkled. And someone just wants us to double check with the architect with these changes. Are you sure we don't have to sprinkle it? So I'll do that. And any other questions that you might have, we'll try to get those answered as well. Anything? Good? Yes, sir?
What is the need for, we have G5 architecture or whatever. Why do we keep changing? We had the company in Fort Wayne.
Martin Riley?
And then, G5. Shouldn't we stay with one of those?
Well, I mean, certainly we did a selection process. So what Kelly Ducey is stating is we had one architect that gave us these ideas that came up with the $4.5 million. And then we had another architect that took over after that said, here are these ideas that you've just seen for $1.5 million. Why don't we have the same architect? Because after interviewing and going through things, looking at proposals with them, even though Martin Riley was included in the second round where G5 was selected, the committee felt best to work with G5, felt very comfortable with them. And if I remember right, we did not pick off of money, okay? It was not driven off of money, but I believe instead of $15,000 to $20,000, $20,000 for G5, I think it was like 30 or something like that, quite a bit more. Not that that drove it, but that was a part of it too. But we felt very comfortable with Rick. He did a good job. He gave us exactly what we needed. Would Rick, if this passes, would G5 be the one? I don't know, it's up for the building committee. I'm sure we might talk to Martin Riley. I'm sure we would talk to Rick and whoever else. But I don't know if that answers your question directly, but. Well, it didn't work the second round with the first architect, I can tell you that. So, what else? Okay. Well, we'll go ahead and wind it down. Pastor Eric, close us in prayer.